If he didn't smash the door of his truck so hard, I never would have looked up from my coffee. That singular, metallic crunch, a sound of frustration that echoed too loudly against the silent, dew-covered pavement of Maplewood Drive, was the first crack in the facade. It was 4:17 a.m. I know the time because I wrote it down. I always write it down. Most people in this neighborhood are asleep at that hour. They're dreaming of their 401ks, their lawn maintenance schedules, or their secret affairs. But not me. I'm usually up, sitting in the dark of my kitchen, watching the street through the slats of the Venetian blinds. It's amazing what you see when the world thinks no one is looking. You see the teenagers sneaking out, the raccoons ravaging the bins, the slow decay of the suburban dream. But Greg was supposed to be boring. He lived in the beige split level at 404. He wore khaki shorts that were always ironed and polo shirts that were always tucked in. He mowed his lawn on Saturdays at 9 a.m. sharp, using a diagonal pattern that never varied. He waved. He smiled. He was the human equivalent of unbuttered toast. But that morning, he slammed the door of that white, unmarked box truck of his. It wasn't a delivery slam. It was an angry slam. I watched him through the gap in the blinds. He walked around to the back of the truck, glancing left, then right. He didn't see me. Nobody ever sees me. I'm just the retired guy with the bad knee and the overgrown hedges.
I'm part of the background scenery. Greg moved to the rear liftgate. He wasn't unloading tools. He wasn't unloading plumbing supplies, which is what he told Mrs. Gable he did for a living. Logistics for independent contractors. Vague, boring, perfect. He pulled a crate out of the back. It was wood, reinforced with metal corners. It looked heavy, but Greg handled it with a strange, terrified delicacy. He didn't drag it, he cradled it. He moved toward his detached garage. Now here is the thing about Greg's garage. It has no windows. Well, it had windows, but 3 months ago he covered them from the inside with heavy-duty blackout film. He installed a new deadbolt. And most curiously, he installed a massive HVAC unit on the side of the structure. For a tool shed? In October? The unit hummed aggressively as he keyed in a code, not a key, a digital code, and slipped inside with the crate. He made 4 trips. Crate, tube, flat rectangular package wrapped in brown paper and bubble wrap, another crate. Then he drove the truck away. The suspension, I noted in my logbook, was riding significantly higher than when he arrived. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a ghost in my own house. I moved my station from the kitchen to the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor. It gave me a direct line of sight into his backyard. I bought a better pair of binoculars, Nikon Monarchs, crisp. The pattern was irregular, which was the most suspicious part. Legitimate logistics run on schedules.
Crime runs on opportunity. He would leave for 3 days, come back at 2 a.m. and unload, always directly into the garage, never into the house. And the garage, that HVAC unit never stopped running. It wasn't cooling the air for comfort, it was controlling humidity. I started checking the news, not the local puff pieces about the high school bake sale. I checked the international wires, Interpol alerts, high-value thefts. November 12th, a report out of a private gallery in Storms of Boston. A collection of Dutch Golden Age sketches and a minor Rembrandtesque portrait were lifted during a sophisticated bypass of the alarm system. November 14th, Greg comes home, 3:30 a.m. He unloads 3 flat packages, roughly 24 by 30 inches, the size of a portrait. I zoomed in with the Monarchs. The wind was kicking up, rustling the oaks between our properties. Greg was struggling with the last package. The wind caught the brown paper wrapping. For a split second, less than a heartbeat, the paper flared up. I saw a glimpse of a frame, ornate, gold leaf, old, the kind of frame that costs more than Greg's Honda Civic. He slapped the paper down, looking around wildly. He looked right at my window. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I was in the shadows. He saw nothing but the reflection of the street lamp on my glass. But he was spooked. I could tell by the set of his shoulders. He shoved the package into the garage and slammed the rolling door.
I sat back in my chair, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs. It wasn't plumbing supplies. It wasn't tools. Greg, the man who wore pleated khakis, was a fence, or a courier. He was a transit point for things that weren't supposed to be moved. I needed more. I couldn't call the police with, "My neighbor has fancy picture frames." They'd laugh me off the phone. I'm the crazy old guy who calls about the noise ordinance when a dog barks twice. I needed concrete proof.
2 days later, Greg left in the Honda. He didn't take the truck. He was wearing a suit, ill-fitting, cheap, like he was going to court or a funeral. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. I watched the street. Mrs. Gable was walking her poodle. The mail carrier was 3 streets over. The coast was clear. I put on my gardening boots. I grabbed a rake as a prop. I walked out my back door, feigning interest in the pile of dead leaves accumulating near the property line. I raked my way closer, closer. The garage hummed, that industrial, low-frequency vibration. I raked my way to his side fence. I looked at the trash bins. It was garbage day tomorrow. The bins were out. I glanced at the street. Empty. I flipped the lid of his recycling bin. Nothing but soda cans and frozen dinner boxes. Smart. He didn't leave a paper trail. I checked the trash bin. Tied black bags. I hesitated. This was crossing a line. This was trespassing, technically. But the image of that gold frame burned in my mind. I untied the top knot of the bag sitting on the surface. Coffee grounds, eggshells, and shredded paper, crosscut, confetti. But sticking to the side of a wet coffee filter was a piece of packing tape. It had a label stuck to it, half torn. I peeled it off with my gloved fingers. It was a fragment of a shipping manifesto. Most of it was illegible, but the logo was clear. A red crest with a double-headed eagle, and the words, Kunstschutz, Vienna. Vienna.
Last week, a museum in Vienna reported a clerical error regarding the location of 3 tapestries. I pocketed the tape. I looked at the garage, the side door, the one he used the keypad on. I wasn't a burglar, I was a watcher, but today the watcher needed to see. I walked to the garage. The keypad was high-end, biometric maybe? No, just a keypad. But the buttons, specific buttons, were worn down. 1, 3, 5, and 7. The grease from his fingers had polished them slightly more than the others. I didn't try to guess the code. That only works in movies. Instead, I went to the window he had blacked out. The film was on the inside, but the glass itself was old. The putty around the pane was dry and cracking. I took out my pocket knife. I gently, carefully, scraped at a corner of the glazing. A tiny piece of the blackout film had peeled away from the glass in the bottom corner, just a millimeter, a bubble of air. I pressed my eye against the cold glass, cupping my hands to block out the daylight. At first I saw nothing, just gloom. Then my eye adjusted. The garage was lined with climate control sensors. Along the far wall, where a workbench should have been, there were racks, metal sliding racks, like you see in the basement of the Smithsonian. And there, leaning against a crate, partially unwrapped, was a painting. It was a seascape, violent, dark waves crashing against a rocky shore. The light in the painting seemed to glow from within the canvas. It was unmistakable. It was the stolen Turner that vanished from a private collection in London 6 months ago. The news said it was likely destroyed. It wasn't destroyed. It was sitting next to a bag of potting soil in Suburban, Ohio. My breath fogged the glass. I pulled back, wiping the spot with my sleeve. Crunch. Gravel. Behind me. My stomach dropped into my shoes. I spun around. The white box truck was idling at the curb. I hadn't heard it approach over the hum of the HVAC unit. Greg wasn't in the Honda. He was in the truck. He had doubled back, or switched vehicles. He was sitting in the driver's seat. The window rolled down. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking down the driveway, past the side of the house, directly at me. He didn't look boring anymore. His face was hard, the slack-jawed suburban expression gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who knows exactly how much prison time is sitting in his garage. He turned off the engine. I had the rake in my hand. It felt ridiculous, a toy against the reality of international felony. He opened the truck door. He stepped out.
He reached under the seat and pulled something out. It wasn't a gun. It was a tire iron. "Arthur," he called out. His voice was cheerful, but it was the wrong kind of cheerful. It was the cheerfulness of a butcher greeting a lamb. "Lose something?" I froze. I was 20 feet from him, 40 feet from my back door. "Just, the wind blew some of my leaves over here," I stammered.
My voice sounded thin, reedy. Wanted to be neighborly, clean it up. Greg smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. He tapped the tire iron against his palm. Tink, tink. "You're a good neighbor, Arthur. Always watching out for us. I appreciate that." He took a step onto the grass. "But you know, sometimes people look too hard. They see dirt where there isn't any." He was closing the distance. He wasn't running. He was stalking. He was going to corner me between the garage and the fence.
"I should get back," I said, taking a step backward. "My show is on." "Wait," Greg said. He was 10 feet away. "I have something to show you, since you're so interested in my garage." He raised the iron slightly. I dropped the rake. I ran. I didn't run like a hero. I ran like a 60-year-old man with a bad knee. I scrambled through the gap in the hedges, tearing my flannel shirt on a branch. I heard his heavy boots hitting the turf behind me. I hit my back porch steps, stumbling, scraping my shin. I threw the door open, slammed it, and threw the deadbolt. I didn't stop there. I ran to the front door, locked it. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hit the buttons. 911. "Emergency, what is your federal crime in progress?" I gasped, sliding down to the floor beneath the window, peering through the blinds. "I need police. I don't know, the FBI. My neighbor, 404 Maplewood. He has the Turner, the stolen Turner." "Sir, calm down. Who has a Turner?" "The painting, the stolen masterpiece. He's coming to my door." I heard heavy footsteps on my porch, then a pounding. Not a polite knock, a demand. Bang, bang, bang. "Arthur," Greg's voice came through the wood, muffled but furious. "Open the door. We just need to talk about boundaries." "Sir, is someone trying to break in?" the operator asked, her voice sharpening. "Yes, he has a tire iron."
"Send everyone." I scrambled away from the door, retreating to the basement. I have a solid corridor down there. I locked myself in with my ham radio and my emergency water. I heard glass break upstairs. I huddled in the dark, clutching the phone. I heard heavy boots on my hardwood floors. He was in my house. He was looking for me. He knew I saw the Turner. He knew the facade was gone. "Arthur?" The voice drifted down the stairwell. "Don't make this messy." I held my breath. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I heard it. Sirens. Not one, a chorus, rising and falling like a chaotic symphony. The footsteps upstairs stopped. I heard running. The back door slammed. I waited. I counted to 100, then 200. Then a different sound. A megaphone. "This is the FBI. Surround the house. Exit the structure with your hands up." I wept. Just a little. The relief was a physical weight leaving my chest. I stayed in the basement for another hour until a uniformed officer kicked open my door and nearly tased me. It took some explaining. When they finally let me out, the street was a carnival of flashing blue and red lights. There were unmarked SUVs, a SWAT armored carrier, and yellow tape everywhere. They had Greg in cuffs, sitting on the curb. He looked small, defeated. The boring neighbor once again, just with his hands zip-tied behind his back. But the real show was the garage. Agents in blue windbreakers were carrying them out.
They wore white cotton gloves. They moved with reverence. The Turner came out first, covered in a protective sheet, then a crate that the lead agent marked as Evidence, Roman Antiquities, then the sketches. My neighbors were standing on their lawns, mouths agape. Mrs. Gable was holding her poodle, looking terrified. "I can't believe it," she whispered to me as I stood on my porch, wrapped in a shock blanket the paramedics gave me. "He was so quiet. He always took in my mail." "Yeah," I said, my voice raspy. "He was quiet." I watched them load the truck, the real truck this time, an FBI evidence hauler. One of the agents, a tall woman in a suit, walked up to my porch. She held a notepad. "You have a sharp eye, Mr. Henderson," she said. "We've been tracking a distribution node in the Midwest for 2 years. We just couldn't pinpoint the drop site. We were looking for warehouses, not a split level with an HOA." "He got sloppy," I said. "He slammed a door." "Well," she smiled, closing her notebook, "that door slam just recovered about $40 million in cultural heritage. You did good." She walked away. I looked at Greg's house. It looked hollow now. The dark windows were just windows. The mystery was gone, boxed up and driven away to a federal vault. I went inside. My back door was broken. There was glass in the hallway. I'd have to fix that. I walked to the kitchen. I made a fresh pot of coffee. It was 6 a.m. The sun was coming up.
I sat down at the table and opened my logbook to a fresh page. November 17th, 0615. Subject, 404 Maplewood. Status, vacant. I looked out the window. Across the street, the new couple at 407 was bringing in their groceries. They had a lot of luggage, heavy luggage, and they were moving it in very quickly, glancing over their shoulders. I took a sip of coffee. I picked up my pen. Subject, 407 Maplewood. Observation. Male subject seems anxious. Luggage appears disproportionately heavy for clothing. The show never ends. You just have to keep watching.